All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're putting on our economic analyst hats to objectively review the feasibility, the mechanics, and the underlying risks of the Green Party's 2026 tax proposal. We're talking about a massive shift in fiscal architecture here, so we're going to rely strictly on the data, the modeling, and the contrasting perspectives provided in our source material to figure out exactly how this is all supposed to work.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the 2026 tax proposals, dive into the revenue and relief numbers, check out the feasibility and modeling risks, look at the contrasting political arguments, and finish up with the tikanga economics perspective.
All right, Part 1, the 2026 tax proposals. Let's establish our baseline.
To understand the why behind this proposal, we really have to look at the macro environment. And honestly, the numbers are pretty stark. On one hand, data shows just 26 individuals holding a staggering $129 billion in combined wealth, literally adding $27 billion in a single year. And then you contrast that with an 18.9% poverty rate among tamariki Māori. The sources emphasize this massive divergence, concentrated asset growth versus severe material hardship, as the absolute core problem this tax policy is trying to tackle.
So what's the proposed fix? Well, the Green Party, led by Marama Davidson and Chloe Swarbrick, has put forward a major structural shift to the tax system. We're not just talking about tinkering around the edges here. They're aiming to fundamentally rebalance who pays what. The endgame? Increasing net government revenue by up to $5.94 billion by the year 2031.
Moving on to Part 2, the revenue and relief. Let's break down the actual mechanics of these numbers.
When you actually run the numbers on this proposed relief, the absolute cornerstone is a $10,000 tax-free threshold, meaning the very first 10 grand you earn is taxed at exactly 0%. The direct result of that? 96% of New Zealanders would end up paying less income tax. That is real, tangible money back in the pockets of everyday earners. But to balance the scales, they're introducing a new top rate of 45%, which kicks in on income over $160,000.
Now, as we all know, tax cuts cost money, right? So to fund this, the proposal stacks several brand new revenue layers. We're talking a 2.5% wealth tax on net assets above $10 million, though that entirely exempts the family home. There's also a 33% inheritance tax on assets over $1 million, a corporate tax hike up to 33% specifically for large companies pulling in over $30 million in turnover, and finally, a 0.06% bank levy aimed directly at the Big Four banks.
The whole point of this, according to the source material, is to completely shift the fiscal heavy lifting. The goal is to take the burden off everyday wage earners who are, let's face it, really struggling with the cost of essentials right now. Instead, the proposal explicitly targets concentrated wealth, massive corporate profits, and untaxed capital accumulation to fund public services.
Which brings us to Part 3, feasibility and modeling risks. This is where the macroeconomic puzzle gets really complicated.
From an analytical standpoint, the biggest red flag comes from the economics consultancy Infometrics. They reviewed the plan and said, sure, the baseline costings look reasonable based on the assumptions provided. But principal economist Brad Olson pointed out a massive caveat. It is exceptionally difficult to accurately model human behavior when you drop this many sweeping tax changes all at once.
It all comes down to overlapping complexities. Imagine a high-net-worth individual who suddenly gets hit by an inheritance tax, a wealth tax, and higher corporate taxes simultaneously. How do they react? That intersection creates a massive blind spot in the models. We're looking at completely unpredictable capital flight risks, creative tax avoidance strategies, and just general uncertainty about how capital will behave when the financial rules of the game change this drastically.
Let's shift gears to Part 4, contrasting political arguments. How is this actually playing out in the political arena?
Unsurprisingly, the political pushback is fierce. On one side, you have the ACT Party's David Seymour, who argues this entire framework just penalizes success. He frames it as weaponizing tall poppy syndrome to drag down high achievers. Then on the other side, you have the Labour Party's Chris Hipkins, who outright rejects both the wealth and inheritance taxes. Labour's stance is essentially, keep it simple and stick to a targeted capital gains tax restricted just to residential property.
Finally, Part 5, the tikanga economics perspective. Let's look at this through a cultural framework.
Our source material from the Maori Green Lantern offers a really fascinating lens here, arguing this tax package is basically manaakitanga in fiscal form. Under this principle, which is the sacred obligation to care for and uplift others, a tax system shouldn't be a neutral thing.
It should actively structure the economy so that essential care is fully funded by those with the deepest pockets, specifically to wipe out systemic issues like child poverty.
The analysis also brings in kaitiakitanga, which is the strict obligation of stewardship. If you view the economy as a shared resource that needs to be carefully tended, then something like a 0.06% bank levy on record profits isn't just a penalty. Under this framework, it's actually an act of economic stewardship designed to stop wealth from simply being extracted by foreign-owned banks.
And lastly, we look at it through whakapapa, the genealogical framework of connection. Through this lens, the proposed inheritance tax takes on a completely different meaning. The source argues it's a vital tool to interrupt the untaxed reproduction of colonial dynastic wealth. The goal here is to rebalance resources and actually invest in the intergenerational future of all whānau across the country.
So, what does this all mean for us? I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to take away from this explainer. The social arguments for rebalancing wealth are clearly deeply rooted, and the moral case is being argued passionately. But as economic analysts, we know the ultimate risk still lies in the math. Can any analyst, or any model for that matter, truly predict how global capital and everyday human beings will behave when the fundamental rules of the economy are completely rewritten? It's a massive unknown, and honestly, the answer to that question is what will ultimately define the success or failure of this entire proposal. Thanks for diving into the numbers with us today. Keep analyzing, and we'll catch you next time.